Hi, it's Katrina. The world is in trouble. Continents are splitting in half, volcanoes are threatening to erupt, and landslides are ready to cause flooding that hasn't been seen since Noah built the Ark. Today, we'll be exploring some of the scariest geological mysteries out there. The world is breaking. An enormous crack just opened up in Africa. There is evidence that Africa is splitting in two, and scientists don't know what to do about it. Scientists are saying that it's only a matter of time before Africa is broken in two and a new ocean is born. Chaos is already beginning to unfold in the African nation of Kenya, where the first signs of the split are happening. A crack appeared abruptly, almost overnight, and it hasn't stopped growing. The crack just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. In Kenya's Narok County, unprecedented heavy rainfall is causing the crack to grow at an astounding rate, pulling apart to form a chasm that looks like it might lead to hell. The sudden appearance of this devastating crack has interrupted traffic and potentially destroyed lives already. Can you imagine driving your car down the road and suddenly falling into a pit? It would seem like the beginning of the apocalypse. Scientists say the crack is related to a regional zone of weakness, but there is nothing regional about it. Something deep below the ground is causing Africa to split in two along its eastern edge. The rift begins at the coast of Djibouti, right across the water from Yemen. Then it continues through Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tanzania. It isn't a perfectly symmetrical line dividing Africa in half. The nations in the west should be perfectly fine, and so should southern Africa. It's the eastern countries that are going to be torn asunder. Okay, so the Earth is breaking apart, but why is this happening? Scientists already know that similar things have happened in the ancient past. Look at Africa and South America and how they used to fit together perfectly like puzzle pieces. That's because the same thing happened to them. They were a single continent that was split in half, and then the Atlantic Ocean formed between them. The underlying cause might have something to do with a superplume. A superplume is essentially a burning hole inside the crust of our planet. This burning hole swells along the eastern edge of Africa, stretching thousands of miles. The crack was already in Kenya, but it was the recent rain that exposed it. Now, Kenya is trying to figure out how to fix a 66-foot wide crack that is only going to get bigger and bigger. We likely won't see the end result of this schism in our lifetimes. According to a recent report from Forbes, the split will take millions of years to fully break a chunk off of Africa. At least that's some good news, right? Once the rift is complete, this new landmass will be an island in the Indian Ocean, sort of like Madagascar. The big one is coming. The big one. 3 small words that strike fear into the heart of every Californian. A recent series of earthquakes has shaken the state, leaving people literally shook. Scientists say the quakes a few weeks ago could be a sign the big one is right around the corner. Some scientists say it's 150 years overdue. That's like the doctor saying you've got 15 weeks to live and 10 years later you're walking on eggshells. The big one is definitely coming, but scientists don't have an exact date. The big one isn't just an earthquake, it's a megaquake. It's a biblical level disaster that has the potential to destroy California, possibly even dragging the state into the ocean. LA might sink like Atlantis. In 10,000 years, future archaeologists will be investigating Hollywood with underwater drones and theorizing what we were like. The big one is a reference to a theoretical megathrust earthquake that will occur along the Cascadia subduction zone. This is where the Juan de Fuca tectonic plate brushes up against the North American tectonic plate. The subduction zone is 621 miles long. It starts at the edge of Vancouver Island in Canada and continues down through California. The scary thing about this subduction zone is that it's capable of producing earthquakes of more than magnitude 9. Magnitude 9 is the worst case scenario, so anything above that is apocalyptic. Ed Nissen from the University of Victoria is an earth and ocean science researcher. He said the tectonic strain within the subduction zone is gradually building. Eventually, the stresses from the strain will overcome friction and the fault will slip. When the fault slips, disaster strikes. This should be terrifying for anyone in California, or even in coastal British Columbia for that matter. The big one is a sure thing, just as sure as the sun will rise tomorrow. The problem is that scientists can't guess when the slip will come. Nissen said it isn't an exact science. It's like blowing up a balloon and trying to guess exactly which breath the balloon will pop. You can't. Different scientists have different expectations. Camille Briand, a seismologist for Natural Resources Canada, said the probability is about 15% that the big one comes in the next 50 years. Camille said it's definitely coming in the next 200 years. When Ed Nissen was asked, he said it could happen tomorrow. Scientists already know there have been 13 megathrust earthquakes along the Cascadia in the past 6,000 years. They happen every 500 years or so. The last one was over 300 years ago, so extrapolate from that what you will. I can tell you the exact moment of the last megaquake. On January 26, 1700, at approximately 9 p.m., the Cascadia subduction zone caused a 9-magnitude earthquake. It was one of the largest earthquakes that has occurred on the planet in the last 4 billion years. The sheer power of this thing isn't even imaginable. The reason I can tell you about this is because people lived through it. The Cowichan people of Vancouver Island woke up with their homes collapsing on top of them. Landslides barreled down the mountains. The shaking was so violent that people fell and couldn't get up. The shaking went on for so long that it made people sick. Thousands of victims floundered on the ground, unable to stand, vomiting because they were so nauseous. If the quake struck today, the same thing would happen to millions of people up and down the coastline. Plus, getting crushed by buildings. On the west coast of Vancouver Island, the quake generated a tsunami that wiped away the village of the Pachena Bay people. There were no survivors. The tsunami was so big it hit Japan, where they also felt the quake. Someone born today in California is almost definitely going to experience the big one in their lifetime. Are you worried? Earth's oldest rocks. Where do you think the oldest rocks in the world are? Maybe in the Australian outback? Or somewhere in Africa, right? The answer is Canada. Rocks more than 4 billion years old can be found in the remote Northwest Territories of the Great Canadian North. Smithsonian researcher Riju Chowdhury is part of a team scouring the territories for crystals that might help uncover secrets of the early history of the planet. Did you know that the Earth began as a ball of fire covered in oceans of magma? It's true, even if scientists don't know the exact ins and outs of the transformation from hellscape to lush biosphere. Scientists suspect the secrets of the Earth's metamorphosis are hiding in the chemical makeup of zircons. Zircons sound a little made up, but I promise you they aren't. These tiny crystals are seriously old, more than 4 billion years old. But scientists have only managed to collect a few bits and pieces of zircons, like little grains of crystal sand, not even enough to cover the plastic at the bottom of a 5-gallon bucket. They haven't found enough to do a proper analysis. This is where the Smithsonian team comes into play. In the summer of 2024, a group of scientists journeyed to the rock formation known as Acasta Gneiss, the oldest rock in the world. Scientists were hoping to find samples of zircon. Zircon crystals are the building blocks of our planet. Think of them like the individual atoms that make up our very beings. Tiny elements come together to form crystals of zircon. Those zircon crystals then form rocks, and those rocks merge together to form continents. The continents smush together to form the planetary crust that we are all living on. The zircon is the smallest link in the chain, but also the most important. You might be wondering why all the rocks on Earth aren't equally old. It's a good question. If our planet formed all at once, shouldn't every rock be more than 4 billion years old? Over the history of our planet, most of the original minerals have been destroyed or altered by endless tectonic activity. The same tectonic activity that causes megathrust earthquakes. Only zircons have survived unscathed thanks to their incredible resilience. It's why scientists only have a handful of them. The Smithsonian researchers have yet to publish the full results of their expedition to search for zircons in Canada, but when they do, I'll be sure to fill you in. Here's to hoping the tiny rocks help solve the mystery of how life originated on the planet. And now for a quick break because it's shout out time. I want to give a huge thank you to Bowtie Videos and Sarah McCullough for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you guys. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. The deepest abyss just got deeper. The deepest freshwater cave in the world just got even deeper. Deeper than anyone had ever imagined. The discovery is shocking and has spelunkers lining up to dive into this otherworldly hole in the ground. It's called Hranis Abyss because it is truly an abyss, the deepest in the world. For decades, the flooded caverns have been a favorite exploration spot for brave adventurers in the Czech Republic. Now, a scientific campaign has doubled the depth of the abyss. It is twice as deep as previously thought. The dizzying abyss is a scientific conundrum. Most caves form from the surface down, like you might dig a hole in your backyard looking for treasure. Water and melting snow gradually dissolve rock, eating away at the ground until massive caves and caverns are formed. Deep caves can sometimes form in the opposite direction. Acidic groundwater is heated by the Earth's mantle, bubbling upward to eat away at the ground until it reaches the surface. This alternative method is how scientists assumed Hranis Abyss was formed. Acidic water carved it from the inside out. This reasoning comes from the fact that the water in the cave contains carbon and helium from deep, deep in the planet. For a really long time, nobody knew how far down the abyss went. Some people claimed it was bottomless. Then, in 2016, a group of researchers used a remotely operated vehicle to descend 1,500 feet. They couldn't go any deeper, though, because their fiber optic communication cable was too short. The true extent of the cave remained unknown. With new technology, scientists recently tried it again. They used a combination of amazing techniques. They didn't even need to go into the abyss. With an array of electrodes, scientists at the Czech Academy of Sciences measured the conductivity of the limestone. This showed any gaps in the rock. Then they used sensors to measure tiny variations in the gravity within the abyss. This revealed large caverns. Lastly, they used seismic waves to produce an underground map. The results were astounding. The abyss extends almost a mile below the surface, which is way deeper than any previous estimates. However, nobody has gone down into those depths. And to be honest, the abyss could be even deeper. Geologist Francesco Sauro from the University of Bologna is curious about what types of organisms are living in the deeper parts of the cave system. Francisco said, and I quote, "We don't know exactly what could be down there. What do you think is there?" When was Antarctica free of ice? Beneath the miles-thick ice of Antarctica, a forgotten history lies buried, waiting to be uncovered. Antarctica is almost 4 times bigger than the United States. It's also almost entirely encased in a layer of ice more than a mile thick. But the ice hasn't always been there. Aren't you a little curious to know when Antarctica was free of its tyrannical ice sheets? There are rumors that human civilization found its way to Antarctica in ancient history. Some people claim Antarctica was home to Atlantis, and that its ruins are hiding somewhere beneath the ice. However, there isn't a mainstream scientist out there who agrees. Most researchers, like Eric Wolf from the University of Cambridge, insist that Antarctica has been covered in ice for the last 34 million years. Let me back things up even further. Around 50 million years ago, our planet was 25 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than it is today. If you think global warming had you sweating last summer, you would have been cooked like a Christmas turkey 50 million years ago. Then things started to cool down. Things cooled down steadily for a very long time, about 16 million years. To this day, scientists can't figure out what triggered the temperature drop. They also don't understand how the ice sheets formed on Antarctica because the climate was still almost 15 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than it is today. Eric Wolf blamed the change on carbon dioxide. The more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the more heat trapped in our biosphere. In the simplest terms possible, CO2 equals sleeping in your own sweat. Uncomfortable, I know. The big question isn't about the past, but about the future. When will all the ice covering Antarctica melt? And when that day comes, will humans even be around? Like so many of our planet's greatest mysteries, nobody has an answer. Scientists say it's important to limit the loss of ice from Antarctica to avoid a flood catastrophe. Even in worst-case scenarios, climatologists don't think humans will heat the world enough to melt the ice in Antarctica. There's nothing we can do but wait and see. The second sun, Nemesis. Hidden dangers may lurk at the edge of our solar system. Scientists might not know as much about our solar system as they think. You may have heard of the elusive planet Nibiru, said to be skulking somewhere at the edge of our solar system, unseen. But did you know there is supposedly a second star out there as well? Its name is Nemesis, a dark companion to our sun, said to be hiding out there somewhere in the vastness of space. This supervillain of a cosmic giant has been blamed for the periodic mass extinctions that plague Earth. There's just one issue. Astronomers have never found direct evidence that Nemesis is real. The myth behind this evil star was born in 1984. It came from the mind of Richard Mueller at the University of California. Richard suggested there is a red dwarf star orbiting the sun about 1.5 million light-years away. Richard came up with this idea because of a bizarre pattern here on Earth. He noticed that every 27 million years or so, something terrible happens. Either there's a mass extinction event or some sort of geological event that wipes out a massive portion of life. Other scientists were attracted to the theory immediately. Researchers speculated that Nemesis was either a brown or a white dwarf star, possibly no larger than Jupiter. I say no larger than Jupiter as if Jupiter were a little baby, but it's bigger than all of the other planets in the solar system combined. Jupiter is a behemoth of a planet. You might be wondering how astronomers could miss a star the size of our biggest planet. It wouldn't be as hard as you think. Nemesis might be really dim, not giving off enough light for scientists to pick up with their instruments. The running theory is that the star Nemesis orbits through the Oort cloud, which is a ring of icy rocks in the farthest reaches of the solar system near Pluto. Because it's so big, it likely picks up an entourage of asteroids as it moves through the Oort cloud. Then, when it gets near Earth, it shoots the asteroids at our planet like a Gatling gun. Nemesis doesn't bombard us with space rocks on purpose. It's just something that happens, with gravity kicking out asteroids and sending them hurtling through the solar system. Some of them undoubtedly hit Earth, causing more extinctions than normal. Without any scientific evidence, Nemesis remains only a theory, but it sure is interesting. What do you think? Siberia won't stop exploding. Scientists have been trying to understand why Siberia is exploding since 2012. Because trust me, it is very much blowing itself up. It turns out Siberia is a ticking time bomb. The vast landscape has so much natural gas built up underneath its frozen ground that it's exploding like bursting bubble wrap. It all began more than 10 years ago with an explosion in the deserted Siberian permafrost. Scientists were puzzled by a gaping crater 160 feet deep and 65 feet wide. There wasn't just a single explosion, though. The blasts were coming from random parts of Siberia, so big and powerful that people heard them from 60 miles away. It's taken more than 10 years of research, but scientists may be on the brink of finally solving the mystery. A recent proposal from researchers at the University of Oslo says that hot natural gas is seeping from underground reserves. Siberia is known for having vast underground reserves of natural gas. But how do they explode? And why do these explosions only happen in Siberia? It's all about the ice. Permafrost is melting at an alarming rate in Siberia. As the temperatures rise, the permafrost thaws. The organic material that has been trapped in the permafrost for thousands of years then decomposes and releases methane. The Norwegian scientists believe that natural gas is seeping up through a geological fault, accumulating underneath the frozen layer of soil. The gas heats the permafrost from below. The gas is suddenly freed when the ice melts, triggering an explosion. The explosion is made even worse by the methane released from all of the decomposing organic matter. It's a perfect storm of gases coming together to blow sky high. Scientists say there are thousands of these depressions all across the Yamal Peninsula, visible only with satellites. The people of Siberia can only hope they aren't standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. To be present when one of these craters is made would be like standing on the world's biggest landmine as it detonates. The Helena Slump. Imagine a wave so massive it could swallow entire cities in a single gulp. This isn't fiction. It's a real threat, and it's closer than you think. The biggest tsunamis in the world are not created by earthquakes, but by landslides. One day, the flanks of a certain volcano in Hawaii will crumble, triggering a tsunami so big that millions of people could die, maybe even 1 billion. Scientists say that just like with the big one in California, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We're heading to Hawaii for this one, but not for a vacation. We need to investigate the fastest growing landforms in the world, the Hawaiian Islands. Hawaii is a geological baby, formed only 5 million years ago. But Hawaii is still growing too. The Pacific Plate is moving below the ocean at a staggering rate of 4 inches per year. Each year, Hawaii gets a little bit bigger. About 3.5 million years after Hawaii was created, it was already starting to fall apart. On the northeast coast of the island of Oahu, geologists have found evidence of what might be the biggest landslide that ever occurred. Half of the Ko'olau volcano collapsed and crumbled into the sea. Pieces of debris nearly 20 miles long slapped the surface of the ocean hard. The volume of material splashing into the water all at once created a wave of unimaginable height. Some models suggest the wave was up to 300 feet tall, but models are often wrong and the figures are low. The waves created by the landslide could have been 400, 600, even 1,000 feet tall. It happened again when the Molokai volcano collapsed, and it will happen again soon when the Helena Slump collapses on the southern flank of the Kilauea volcano on the Big Island. The Helena Slump is a big pile of landslide material. As the island grows, material from the top of the volcano spills downward and into the sea, falling onto the seabed and adding extra land to the island. However, sometimes the material builds up, sort of like water trapped behind the wall of a dam. The Helena Slump is moving as fast as the island is growing, at almost 4 inches a year. It's also being pushed by the magma injected into the volcano, and it's being pulled down by gravity. The bare bones fact is that the Helena Slump will fail, and when it does, you can expect waves of possibly 1,000 feet to crash into coastal communities around the world. If you live in a city on the coast of the Pacific Ocean, you could find yourself underwater any day now. You might want to invest in a submarine. 3.26 billion year old impact. Before the dinosaurs were obliterated by an enormous rock from outer space, a much larger rock may have brought those very dinosaurs to this planet. I know that sounds totally backwards, so let me explain. 3.26 billion years ago, a meteorite of unimaginable size crashed into Earth. Don't worry though, not much was killed because life hadn't fully emerged on our planet yet. This was long before trilobites were skittering across the ocean floor. In the immediate aftermath of the gigantic impact, there was a lot of destruction, which led to change. That destruction may have been what kick-started life for the first complex organisms in the world, which ultimately evolved into dinosaurs, and later human beings. Planetary scientists at Harvard University like Nadia Dravon and team are learning new stuff all the time. The team believes that the meteorite created a tsunami that released nutrients crucial to very early microbes. By the way, the meteorite was about 23 to 36 miles in diameter. That's 50 to 200 times bigger than the space rock that killed the dinosaurs. Evidence was found of the impact in South Africa in the form of meteorite fragments. When scientists analyzed the fragments, they found an interesting chemical makeup. It seems that the space rock may have brought hundreds of gigatons of phosphorus to the planet. That's gigatons with a capital G. The phosphorus would have dispersed into the atmosphere, gradually falling over the world and helping to boost life. Phosphorus is an essential mineral. The meteorite also worked by stirring up the primeval oceans, bringing the very important metal iron into shallower regions. Iron is another one of those essential elements needed to support life. Life probably would have thrived anyway. After all, life finds a way. But it would have taken way longer without this monster meteorite crashing into the world. Without its 100 gigaton payload of phosphorus, life today might look a lot different. Hopefully, we're all done with meteorites for another few million years. But you never know. The volcano that will destroy the world. 2024 marked a terrifying glimpse into Yellowstone's destructive potential. In the summer of 24, a hydrothermal explosion at Yellowstone National Park had tourists running for their lives. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but if the explosion had been the start of Yellowstone blowing its top, no amount of running would have helped. Yellowstone is one of only a few supervolcanoes capable of destroying the world. The wonders enjoyed by so many tourists today, especially in the Biscuit Basin area where the recent explosion was, are on top of the supervolcano. The park is inside the volcano's mouth. How do you feel about visiting Yellowstone now that you know you're in the mouth of a volcano? Hopefully you'll feel a little better knowing that according to the deputy scientist at the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, Mark Stelton, there is no imminent eruption to fear. Mark said Yellowstone is perfectly dormant, sleeping as soundly as a bear in hibernation. The volcano hasn't erupted in 70,000 years, but that doesn't mean it's overdue for a great big pyroclastic blowout. It leaks lava every 20,000 years, so that could happen. But a little lava leakage never hurt anybody. It's nothing compared to a real explosion. Let's just say this geological time bomb does go off. Who would be immediately affected? Everybody in Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming would likely be swallowed in lava flows. It would suck big time. Then the skies would turn black because of all the ash ricocheting around the atmosphere. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the eruption could decimate the climate for decades, possibly centuries. People's children would be born in a world of cold darkness, all because of a supervolcano. The ice doomsday is worse than you think. Time is running out. A ticking time bomb threatens to reshape our coastlines. But scientists have a plan. It's radical. It will probably never work, but they have a plan. Scientists are hoping to stop the Thwaites Glacier from melting before it destroys New York City. And that's only the beginning. It's back to Antarctica, where a rogue glacier is threatening to flood the entire east coast of the USA. It's called the Thwaites Glacier, but it's more commonly known as the Doomsday Glacier. The glacier is huge, covering about 74,000 square miles. What's even bigger is the monumental load of ice behind the glacier, the West Antarctic Ice Sheet. Do you remember all of that ice I was talking about earlier in the video when discussing Antarctica's ancient past? Well, 760,000 square miles of it is clinging to life thanks to the Doomsday Glacier. The Thwaites acts as a natural dam, preventing the West Antarctic ice sheet from collapsing. Here's what happens if the Thwaites collapses. New York City, Charleston, Atlantic City, and Miami will all be under 10 feet of water. Those cities will be unlivable for as long as many of us will be alive. If the Thwaites goes, so does the West Antarctic ice sheet, and when it melts, things will be significantly worse. An extra 700,000 square miles of ice will become water, and global sea levels will rise even higher. The Rocky Mountains could become the Rocky Islands because the water will be so high. I told you scientists have a plan, and I wasn't making it up. Researchers at the University of Chicago, led by Professor Douglas McHale, recently put forth a proposal. They suggested pumping seawater onto the surface of the Doomsday Glacier. That seems counterproductive, but it could work. Cold air temperatures would cause the water to freeze, thereby thickening the glacier. The issue is, as with everything, cold, hard cash. It would cost about $6 billion a year and require an obscene amount of energy to pull it off. Okay, if that's too radical, check out this other idea proposed by glaciologist John Moore at Lapland University. John suggested designing an underwater curtain to go in front of the glacier and stop warm water currents from melting it. The curtain would be 62 miles long and cost about $50 billion. Just 50 billion to protect all the cities of the East Coast, no big deal. Unlike most of the potential disasters I've told you about today, the epic flooding is on its way soon. Associate Professor of Glaciology Christine Dow said scientists were hoping it would take at least 100 years to lose the ice. But now the melting has accelerated and is happening way faster. There is still no exact date set, but the ice is rapidly pouring into the ocean.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
The mysterious Sri Lankan Stargate. Sri Lanka's mysterious Stargate is located in the city of Anuradhapura. According to some, the Stargate is a dormant portal from a long-lost time, one which supposedly has the power to send a person or another being spiraling through the universe. Of course, there is no real archaeological evidence for this, but that hasn't stopped the conspiracy theories from running wild. The city of Anuradhapura is an ancient wonder on its own, even without the Stargate. It was the heart of Sri Lanka's early Buddhist culture, established as a holy city in the Land of Kings back in 377 BC. That's over 2,000 years ago. The sacred city contains within its borders an urban park from days long past, about 40 acres in size. The park is surrounded by 3 gigantic Buddhist temples, and it's inside this temple park where the Stargate can be found, etched onto an ancient piece of stone. The name of the carving is Sakwala Chakraya, which translates to universe cycle. Archaeologists believe it might have been used as a star map or a primitive calendar. Others say the strange symbols and shapes within the circle are actually used to unlock the secrets of the universe and open the portal. Seeing as nobody's ever been able to open the portal in modern times, this may not be the case. It's still a major mystery, especially since nobody has any real clue what the function of the Sakwala Chakraya was. There are no historical records of it, and it's not mentioned in any ancient texts. Secret underground world. Underneath the crowded city streets of Beijing in China, there is an underground world, and it's home to about 1 million residents. It's a secret place built of concrete, which took shape back in the 1960s at the request of former President of the People's Republic of China, Mao Zedong. With the threat of the Cold War hovering over China's head, Mao decided to build a whole ton of concrete bunkers underneath Beijing to protect the most important people if a nuclear bomb fell. However, by the 1980s, the threat of nuclear war had pretty much evaporated, and so the bunkers weren't needed anymore. The government then converted the bunkers into things like shops and offices, and today they are also used as underground apartments. Living below ground may not be quite as cool as it sounds. The secret city beneath Beijing is populated primarily by migrant workers, students, and people who can't afford the rising cost of living above ground in Beijing. The price of a subterranean apartment is about 1/3 the cost of living above ground, although the conditions reflect the price. There's an estimated 1 million folks jammed into these underground bunkers like sardines in the dark. There are absolutely no foreigners allowed inside this secret place. But in December 2015, photographer Antonio Facilongo slipped past the guards and took some photographs. He shared the pictures with National Geographic and told the story of the people living there. Many of those he talked to were embarrassed because they told their families that they had good jobs, when in fact they were stuck under the city streets like sewer dwellers. And even though the city would like to prohibit living inside the shelters, it's too late, and they have nowhere to put the 1 million displaced citizens. The secrets of the Messel Pit. The Messel Pit in Germany is one of the most amazing secret places on the planet, filled to the brim with prehistoric fossils. It's located about 20 minutes from the city of Darmstadt, in the middle of the forest, where there stands a flooded strip mine half a mile wide. At first glance, the Messel Pit looks like an ordinary abandoned mine, but it's actually been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1995, and its history goes back 48 million years. This was the Eocene period, when the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was significantly higher than today. The Arctic was a boiling swamp where giant crocodiles lived, and Antarctica was covered in a tropical rainforest. The Himalayan mountains still hadn't been formed yet, and the world's oceans were 150 feet higher than today. That means that back in the day, Europe was just a stretch of water filled with many islands instead of a continuous landmass. In the Eocene period, the Moselle Pit was a deep lake 2 miles across. The lake likely bubbled with carbon dioxide, which killed animals who got too close. For years, creatures died and sank to the bottom of the lake, which preserved them miraculously in the sediment. When the mine closed down in the 1970s, the miners left and the dinosaur hunters arrived. Ever since, they've been pulling some of the most spectacular fossils out of the dried lake bed. Paleontologists have already identified almost 45 different mammal species among the thousands of specimens recovered. This lake was a real miracle, attracting a huge number of animals over millions of years, and then killing them and preserving them like flowers that were pressed between the pages of a book. Thanks, lake! The first Philistine cemetery. Archaeologists in Israel have recently come across the very first Philistine cemetery ever found. This is quite a big deal because for a very long time, historians have been trying to learn more about the Philistines, the villains in the Bible, best known for their giant warrior Goliath in the book of Samuel. Sadly, there isn't much in the way of archaeological evidence for these people. It took researchers 30 years of exploring Ashkelon in southern Israel before they came across the cemetery, which is 3,000 years old. According to Daniel Master from Wheaton College, the cemetery is hopefully going to reveal much about the Philistines that nobody knew before. Archaeologists found skeletons buried in the graveyard, people put in the ground with jugs and bowls that had likely been filled with perfumed oil. Some skeletons wore bracelets and jewelry, while others were buried alongside weapons. Some people had also been cremated. Some bodies had been thrown into pits, while others were placed neatly into multi-chambered tombs. It's pretty odd because it doesn't only show one single way of burying the dead, but many. This means everything we thought we knew about Philistine burial customs is wrong and needs to be rewritten. Then there's Ashkelon itself, a mysterious city whose secrets we still haven't completely unraveled. It's one of just 5 cities that belonged to the Philistines 3,000 years ago, a major hub on the Mediterranean for trade. However, during the Crusades, the city was destroyed, and much of its ancient history was lost. The city of jinns. Bala Fort, located in the highlands of Jebel Akhdar in Oman, is a mysterious place steeped in legends of spells, black magic, and myth. Some call it the City of Jinns or the City of Magic, and people have been living here since roughly 500 BC. Although the fort itself was built starting in the 12th century AD by the Banu Nibhan desert tribe, it was also rebuilt multiple times and was finally renovated and opened to the public in May of 2012. Omani locals believe the fortress is the epicenter of all paranormal activity in the country. There are multiple legends, like the one that says that 1,400 years ago, a man was stoned to death by the villagers for practicing wizardry. This dead wizard then turned into a jinn or a spirit and now haunts the city. There is also a tree growing in the citadel which supposedly bestows an untimely death upon any foreigner who touches it, as it had been tainted by yet another sorcerer. Any creepy story the villagers could think of, they passed it along. The tall walls and strong towers of Bala Fort grew until most of the people living nearby simply left it alone to decay naturally. Do you believe in the existence of black magic? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Psychedelic Salt Mine. 650 feet underneath Yekaterinburg in Russia is a place called the Psychedelic Salt Mines. The mines feature mind-bending natural formations that formed millions of years ago. The walls are brightly colored in yellows and whites, reds and blues, with the colors swirling in and out of each other in a psychedelic mixture unlike anything else seen on Earth. The long and winding tunnels of the mine are like a free acid trip, like rivers of color had actually dried and then been preserved in the rock. In truth, that is kind of what happened. The unbelievable swirls of color are there thanks to the layers of mineral carnallite. It's totally natural and more than a bit trippy. The mine was originally used to harvest salt, but most of the operations have ceased, and now the miles and miles of twisting passageways are totally abandoned. However, nobody is allowed in without government permission, and so this is one secret place you probably won't be visiting. And besides, the tunnels are pitch black, and the air is full of tiny salt particles. These salt particles create a feeling in your throat like you're parched in the desert without any water. The secret throne of the Knights Templar. One of the most mysterious strongholds of the Knights Templar is hiding underneath the cobblestone streets of Paris. Historians believe it was once their mightiest fortress, a place which these days isn't nearly as imposing as it once was. The fortress was built in the 13th century in a small part of Paris that was actually covered completely by a swamp. It was a gigantic fortification, with a great tower, turrets for defense, and high walls to keep everyone out. After the Templars were gone, the fortress fell into disrepair. It was used briefly to jail the French royal family during the French Revolution, and then was demolished by Napoleon III in 1853. These days, the stronghold is gone. A park was established over its remains in 1857, today called the Square du Temple. Many people who dine at the fancy cafes have no idea that they are sipping coffee at the exact place where the Knights Templar held their most secretive meetings. And since the entire area is now covered in stones and brick, there is no real way to see what's underneath. That said, experts believe there could in fact be secret underground chambers or passageways that never got destroyed, but were built over as Paris moved into the modern age. Fontanelle Cemetery Caves. The Fontanelle Cemetery Caves in Naples is one of the most secretive and disturbing places in all of Italy. It's an ancient European ossuary, one which began as a secondary burial ground in the 1500s. This was a time when the churchyards and cemeteries were overflowing, and many European countries didn't know what to do. In Naples, the solution was to temporarily dispose of corpses inside of a cave on the outskirts of town. It started when the Spanish occupied Naples in the 1500s, and then the caves really took off during the plague outbreak of 1656. Bodies were dumped into the caves all the way into the 1830s with the cholera epidemics. But 1656 was definitely the worst, seeing as the plague killed about half the population of Naples, or 150,000 people. It took an entire generation for the city to recover socially and economically. With so many bodies being in the caves, the whole area soon took on a dark aura for the townsfolk. It became known as a haunted place, somewhere filled with the tormented souls of those who never received proper burial and were stuck in purgatory. Then, when Naples was hit by an extraordinarily heavy rain, the city was flooded and the cave poured out skulls and bones into the streets. Finally, in 1872, the anonymous remains were catalogued and organized. Everything was buried, and the dead were placed into their own boxes or crypts. Even today, people go to the Fontanelle crypts to ask the dead for favors and to place wishes on small rolls of paper into their empty eye sockets. Goblin Valley. Goblin Valley State Park is by far one of the stranger places in Utah, and one with an epic history. The park's scenery is stunning, and it has plenty of outdoor activities for a family of adventurers. It lies deep in the San Rafael Desert and is home to thousands of goblins. Not real goblins, of course, but rock-shaped goblins. There is a section of the park filled with soft sandstone formations which have eroded over many thousands of years. The erosion has created squat, goblin-looking rocks that look ominous in the dark, like an army of marching monsters. But in fact, these formations are called hoodoo rocks, and they're completely natural. But Goblin Valley State Park is more than just a collection of rocks. There is also evidence that Native American tribes lived here a very long time ago. There are pictographs and petroglyph panels here, which were left over from a variety of ancient cultures. The Paiute tribes made artwork here, as did the Ute and the Fremont. Secret Cave Chamber. In Gibraltar, a mysterious cave chamber was sealed completely off by sand for about 40,000 years. This chamber is located deep in the back of the Vanguard Cave, and it had been lived in by Neanderthals prior to being sealed shut. At least that's according to Clive Finlayson from the Gibraltar National Museum, who was studying the cave when he came across the lost chamber. It was about 43 feet long, filled with eerie stalactites hanging from the ceiling. Clive and his team of scientists were also surprised to discover the bones and ancient remains of animals, such as hyenas and griffin vultures, as well as gigantic sea snails called whelk. The researchers also discovered a tooth from a 4-year-old Neanderthal in this same cave a few years ago, and they think the child was a victim of a hyena attack. But the snails proved significantly harder to place, because hyenas didn't eat snails, and they wouldn't have carried something from the sea all the way into a dark cave chamber. That was something only a Neanderthal would have done. Researchers believe Neanderthals had lived inside the cave over 40,000 years ago. They wandered out in the daytime to collect snails, then retreated into the safety and cozy darkness of the secret cavern, like the womb of the earth. Thanks for watching! Which of these mysterious places would you like to visit? Let me know in the comments below. And remember to subscribe and come back soon. See you later. Bye!